Folks, welcome into another edition of SportsBookReview.com's Roundtable video series. Today, we're going to talk a little bit of off-season. Yes, some off-season college football. Let me bring in my panel today. It is a table for three, Flash Watson and Jeff Nadeau. Let's get right down to it. I like to start off with some simple questions here just to get some feel on what we're looking at. Flash, I'm going to start with you here. Do we see college football in September?
I think 100% we do. I think boys don't go back until around the 22nd of July. That's 11 weeks away. I think a lot can happen in 10 or 11 weeks. And that's the athletes going back 2 weeks earlier than the normal college kids. So for me, even if, I think it's scheduled around the 7th of September. So even if we meet maybe the 21st, I think we 100% see college football start in September.
Jeff, we're still a little bit of ways off here, being in early May. When we're taking a look at college football, when these kids actually go to camp, now keep in mind also no spring practices, but when they usually show up for fall camp, it's that last week of July, first week of August to get going. So we do have a little bit of, leeway, so to speak. So my question just to start off, same as Flash here, Jeff. Do we see college football in September?
I would say we do. I think there's obviously a shot we could be pushed back a week or two where we end up only playing 10 games. But yeah, I think that you're starting to see a lot more positive things come out about college football. The problem is, Donnie, college football is a lot different than obviously the pros, where and I think that the table's been set that college football won't come back unless students are on campus. Now, if you follow this, 30 or 40 Division I teams have already discussed the likelihood that they'll be back, and most of the other ones are in the talks as well. So, yeah, I would say we will have college football. It's just a question of how many games and what the situations look like week to week.
Flash, you played high-level soccer in Europe, obviously being in the EPL. What's more fun, Flash, than going in on a breakaway in soccer and putting one in the back of the net and hearing the explosion from the crowd? It's the same way for these big-time athletes. The reason why they go to Clemson, the reason why they go to Alabama, they're sold out, 85 to 100,000 people cheering them on. Would be really interesting if those stadiums were empty and the kids were still out there in those cavernous stadiums and playing. So my question to you here, Flash, bringing you back in. People say college football can't go without the fans. What do you say about that? And also, do you think that we can have a chance to have fans in the stands along with football in September, Flash?
I have to say yes, because otherwise it's a complete contradiction. We've got 85 to 90% of the game where the two lineups are less than 2 foot away from each other. I know no other sport that is as close a contact as American football, as in college football. You've got coverage, you've got the offensive line, defensive line, and you've got maybe 10, 12, 13, 14 guys that are less than 2 foot away for 90% of the game, Donnie. So for me, if they're there for 90%, then the fans can be there for the game. Maybe they'll spread it out a little bit. Instead of a 40, 50,000 capacity, they might knock it down to 25, 30. But yeah, if the players are lining up, then there's no reason why the fans can't be there as well.
Jeff, you have old school and you have new school sort of colliding at this point, because obviously the kids do want to play football, but there's old school guys like Notre Dame's athletic director saying, hey, look, I don't want to play if there's any fans in the stands. And then you have other coaches saying, well, hey, look, maybe we'll get fans in the stands later. We can start the season a little bit earlier. Some good can come out of this, Jeff. We've done a lot of content together and looking at this. And you know what I want down? The half times don't have to be like 45 minutes, so we have to watch both bands take place. I would actually like it, Jeff, if maybe less fans are there and no band from either team. Let's get that second-hand kickoff. What do you think about people saying that college football can't play without fans in the stands?
Well, it's nonsense, first of all. Second of all, look, do I want to see fans? Of course. Do I want to see, a packed house at the big house on Saturday? Of course I do. But, Donnie, the truth of the matter is, over the last couple of years, on average, college football brings in almost $5 billion a year. The top 20 programs bring in almost $1 billion a year. I mean, it's just that simple. I know we want to see people in the stands, and I know we want to, watch a Saturday game with plenty of people cheering for it. But truth of the matter is, it's probably not likely. But for people to say that they don't think college football is going to happen because we might not get that fans in the stadium is nonsense. Regional, national TV networks get paid. They're going to make a ton of money off that itself. I know they're not going to make what they normally do, but the thought process of not having college football would be a death knell to pretty much every college program in America. There's absolutely no shot, Donnie, we don't have college football this year. It might not be in September and October, and last resort might be we do it in the spring, but they're going to have college football. It might not be with fans, but the money is just eye-popping.
Yeah, Jeff talks about money. Obviously, the Power 5 conferences do bring in a lot of money. Outside the Power 5 conferences, Flash, a little bit different there. When we take a look at MAC football, not a lot of people in the stands. But when we see the schedule changes that might be forced to come up here, it gets a little bit interesting here because let's just say Alabama has a 12-game schedule. 3 or 4 of those games are bye games where they have it at home against a MAC team or a lower-level Sun Belt team just so they can fill the stands with 80,000 fans, get that paycheck, and also pay the paycheck of the other school to play. But more importantly, it's like an easy 3 or 4 wins. Do you see any maybe scheduling conflicts here that say, you know what, let's just go in division or in conference play? Because I got to tell you, Flash, when you take a look at teams like Clemson trying to make a charge to the national championship, if you tell them they just have to play the ACC, they're like, hey, no problem at all. We win every game by 40. But then if you take a look at Alabama or Auburn or one of the SEC teams, they go, hey, look, no cupcake games. You just go SEC for the rest of the year. Do you see any changes coming up or maybe some effects that some of these teams have to make in this pandemic?
No, I don't think so. I think it's going to be a case of it's all or nothing. I think they have to keep the whole schedule the same. I think you have to, because otherwise it's an unfair advantage. You've got, say, the ACC and Clemson. They'll just go and walk it. They'll be 30, 40 points up, and then they'll bring off their starters and bring in their sophomores and just give everyone it's a massive advantage, not just for this year, but for next year, because the roster will be that easy, Donnie, that you've got the chance of LSU and Bama fighting every single week. And listen, you can't do it. It's lopsided and it's an unfair advantage to Clemson.
No, you're exactly right, Flash, because when you go through the SEC, it's murderer's row each and every week, very little layups that you get, which is why they build in those late in the season cupcake games before they go play the Iron Bowl between Alabama and Auburn. Jeff, I'll bring you into this conversation as well. Changing, we don't know exactly what's going to happen. We think we're going to get a full game scheduling, but who knows how it's going to progress over the summer, and there might be some scheduling conflicts out here. And I got to tell you, as a sports fan myself, Jeff, I know you might be heading in the right direction. I'm all right if I don't get Alabama and Kent State.
Yeah, I couldn't care less. One other thing, Donnie, real quick, just to kind of stabilize what we have been talking about. On average, Donnie, now this is on average. I'm not talking about the big boys. I'm talking about on average. The average football team in college football generates $32 million per year. The next 35 sports at that university doesn't even make $32 million. That's how important college football is to the ecosystem of a sports program at any school. At the end of the day, Donnie, though, with the scheduling stuff you talked about, I think we will see some modifications where I don't know if we'll see 12 games. I just don't. I think we could see a 10-game schedule where you have 9 conference games and then 1 non-conference game. Now, the non-conference game would be equated to your level of competition. So, as Flash said, or you, Donnie, said, where maybe you'll have Alabama play an ACC school, or you'll have Marshall play, UL Lafayette, kind of an on-the-radar kind of thing. But, Donnie, I will ask you this. What if we were to do this, where it's just a regional idea, where the ACC plays the SEC each year, or this year, Big 10, Big 12, Pac-12, Mountain West. They just duke it out each, the whole year. That would be something regional where you wouldn't have as much travel and things like that. But again, if you just stuck to the conferences, you wouldn't have much travel either. So, yeah, I think the most likely situation is a 10-game schedule, we duke it out that way normally.
No, I see where you're going, but I could see, the hardheads in the SEC saying, wait a second, we got to play the ACC, which possibly could be Clemson, or let's just say if Miami is on the rise up, and the Pac-12, They get to go up against the Mountain West. I mean, of course, it's a hard thing to try to look at, but we know those power struggles that are certainly going to take place.
Well, the Pac-12 should start winning in the Final Four, and then they get some more respect. Until they start winning, they're not going to be on the same level as the SEC. So, they have no one to blame but themselves for that.
We are gamblers here, so we always like to flip it back to that notion, Flash. I'll bring you into this and take a look because we know about practices. They're used to getting a good, 15, 16 practices, maybe 2 to 3 weeks in the off season of getting the blood flowing, saying, hey, kids, here's what we're going to be doing. Make sure you remember this for August when we get back to camp. Now, I got to tell you, I went through this as a lower-level wide receiver in college. I got to tell you, Flash, I didn't remember anything, basically, from what we learned in April and May as we got through to August. So I think them missing out on the pageantry of the spring and waking up early and working out together, I don't think it's going to be that big of an impact. As long as these guys can get in a good 30 to 35 days before their first game, I think they'll certainly be okay. But taking a look at your capping structure, Flash, because we know some teams are returning. Clemson, a la one of the best football players in the country with Trevor Lawrence, when maybe somebody else like a Miami is getting a De'Ara King at quarterback. How do you take a look at over the summer with this short, compacted field and say, you know what, I think maybe one team might have an edge over another just because the regime is there and the quarterback is back?
Well, the biggest advantage is the continuity. We've got to go with who's already got their quarterback in place. All their weapons are still there, and they're going to improve. The problem you've got is when you've lost 4, 5, 6 players to the draft, and you bring in great replacements. Now, spring practice was like 3 weeks ago, so that put a line through that. So these boys have got to then hit the ground running to try and force their way in and learn the program. For me, this year, it's a massive advantage to the Ohio State and to Clemson.
No, you're right on there, Flash, with those points. Jeff, I'll bring you back in here and we take a look at, the lack of practice that you might have. But let's also take a look at what the pandemic might cause here, because we know it's not exactly going away until we get a vaccine. Do you think, Jeff, and again, I'm just, flying off the cuff here, trying to think of some options where maybe some outer level type of things you can look at. Let's just say you go in your Notre Dame, your Florida State, or your Alabama, right? There's a chance that your quarterback might come down with a disease or a virus that you might get throughout the football season. Do you think maybe earlier in the season, Jeff, they're trying to get their second, third, and fourth string guys together, maybe even on the offensive line or defensive line, where you say, hey, look, you should be able to flatten this team early in the season in one of those buy-in games by 40 points. But by halftime, you might be trying to get some other players up to speed in games itself. It's just kind of interesting to look at. Tell me a look at maybe some of those capping techniques you might use in this interesting year.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be something where depth will obviously be important, and obviously the big boys will come out on top as usual. I mean, teams that have strong recruiting classes, you're going to be able to bring in. You look at a team like Clemson, prime example. If Justin Ross and Amari Rodgers go out of the game, you bring in Frank Ladson and Joseph Nada, who are top-level recruits. So you're not missing much of a beat there. But, yeah, you're going to have to obviously do something. There's obviously going to be different things you're going to have to worry about that are not normally stuff you have to worry about. Generally a team will keep guys in. I know, Donnie, I remember many a time you and I bet on games where we need a late score and you still have Travis Etienne in the game and he breaks a big run. So
yeah.
You're right, it might be different. But yeah, I mean, just to kind of piggyback off what Flash said, and you made a great point there on what. Anytime you lose players, it's important. But even this year, you look at a team like Alabama, prime example. Now it's all of a sudden, Donnie, where Alabama's back to where they were 5 or 6 years ago, where you remember they always had a really good football team, but for many years the quarterback situation was a problem. The years of like Blake Sims at Alabama, those years. You're back to that for Alabama. Where do you go? Mac Jones? Do you go to the Tagovailoa kid? There are big shoes to fill with not only Tua gone, but now Jalen Hurts is gone as well, and he was obviously gone last year. But you don't have the Tua to fall back on, so you're going to obviously want to go to a team like a Clemson who brings back the best player in the country, that brings back the high-level receivers. But last year was such a talent-rich draft that there's a lot of good football players gone that a lot of teams are going to have to make up for.
No, Jeff, I thought you might have actually gone with a Blake Barnett reference there as well. We all see the magistry of him as he headed down the USF. So you're right about it. They no longer have those top-level guys, but they're going to have to incorporate and get some of those quarterback plays to certainly step up. If we take a look at we want a college football season to happen. We're going to go at it right here on the roundtable as if it is going to happen, even though we don't have any practices yet or even technically what the schedule is going to look like. We still have favorites out there. I'm going to bring in you, Flash. Clemson plus 175, Ohio State plus 400, Alabama plus 700, Georgia 10-1 to win the national championship. Or maybe you take a long shot and say, you know what? This is going to be kind of an interesting year. I'm not going to go with some of these heavy favorites. Maybe you take a look at a Miami at 100-1, Oklahoma State at 100-1. Flash, who are you picking here to get into that college football playoff? And maybe a bonus team that says, you know what? Watch out for this team.
I've gone with Clemson as probably the best value I've seen over the last few years. I've got them at plus 300. Money's gone down already, Donnie, because I just think everything favours them. They've probably got 5 of their attacking line that are going to go to the draft. You've got probably the second or first for the Heisman in Trevor Lawrence. I think that they're going to put points up on the board. They're going to bring through players. Their roster is as deep as you like. And then they bring in Will Shipley as well, who's a 5-star running back. So for me, everything points to Clemson. Then I look and think, okay, so who are they going to be facing at the end of the season? And the Ohio State, Justin Fields, the other Heisman favourite. This year, let's not try and complicate it, because I think we've got Clemson, Ohio State. Then I'm going to go for Bama. And then I want one from the other 3. I think LSU, I think they're one and done. And then I think Oklahoma or Georgia are going to take up that 4th seed. I'm leaning towards Georgia, Bama, Ohio State, Clemson, but Clemson, big favourite to win at plus 300. I'm not going anywhere but there, Donnie.
Yeah, when we look at the favorites here, Jeff, I mean, it's easy to pick Clemson, yes, but it makes sense to pick Clemson because in order to win the national championship, you have to make the playoff. And if you're going to play the ACC, there's a pretty good chance that Clemson's going to wind up in those Final Four spots, as opposed to maybe the SEC teams that are bunched up, the Alabamas, the Georgias, the Floridas, and the LSUs going at it. Who do you think, Jeff, will end up in that Final Four? And maybe give me a long shot. Say, you know what, in this crazy season, this team might wind up in that Final Four and get a shot at it.
Yeah, I mean, my team to pick to win the national title would be Clemson. Obviously, I think, you look at what they bring back. I mean, it's hard to kind of beat. I mean, Trevor Lawrence is as good as it gets. I mentioned Justin Ross and Amari Rodgers. They also bring back the best running back in the country in Etienne, who I think is finding himself a top 15 NFL draft pick, which is crazy. You generally don't put a running back that high, but I worry a little bit about what they'll have on the offensive line. They did lose starters of that group last year. Defensively, you lose guys like, Kayvon Wallace and A.J. Terrell, which are going to be tough. But as we know at Dabo, I mean, he brings back a 3rd best recruiting class. He will have guys that will come in and be big players right away. So, yeah, Clemson would be my favorite. As far as a sleeper team, Auburn's interesting to me. I think Bo Nix coming back is obviously interesting. You obviously have a terrific defensive line, even with, losing guys like Marlon Davidson. I mean, you bring back, Big Cat Bryant and guys like that. So, Auburn's interesting. You have to wonder, can Gus Malzahn actually get the job done? I mean, it's been a long time. I mean, when was the last time? Has Gus Malzahn ever won anything? I mean, truthfully, back when they went to the NFC or not the NFC, the title game, and that was when Cam Newton was there. I mean, that was years ago. You got to start to try to find some success here, and maybe Alabama's down a little bit. Maybe Auburn could come in and figure it out. Bo Nix is an interesting player.
Yeah, it's interesting also, Jeff, as we take a look here, to win the Heisman, Bo Nix, plus 2,500. So if you figure they're going to make a Final Four run, he's certainly going to be in the equation for a Heisman Trophy championship. Fellas, we can talk college football all day. I do want to thank you for joining me today on our SportsbookReview.com Roundtable Series video specializing in college football. Will it take place? Some championship futures to take a look at. Flash watching Jeff Nadu. I'm Donnie Seymour. Thanks again for tuning in. And as always, everything college football, check out SportsbookReview.com.